Auckland. Leeds Rhinos forward Stevie Ward could be out for almost 3 months after knee surgery. The 25-year-old was injured during Leeds' Super League defeat at St Helens on the 22nd of February.
Yeah, great player, but a bit of a biscuit. Hull FC star Jake Connor is also a player who's been injured in the last week. He's been ruled out for 6 weeks with his knee injury, so not as bad as first feared, I think, for Jake Connor. And the Hull FC fans will be looking forward to him getting fixed up.
Yeah, didn't realise snakes had knees, but there we go. Catalan Dragons have signed Samoa prop Sam Cassiano from the Melbourne Storm. The 28-year-old has agreed a 3-year contract with the Perpignan-based side. The Auckland-born Cassiano played 6 times for New Zealand, including in the 2013 World Cup final against Australia, but has since won 5 caps for Samoa. Samoa is actually where my sister is right now.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
she gets around the Pacific, doesn't she? She's got a nice.
Well, she's done nice a big tour. Yeah, she's done Fiji, Vanuatu, Samoa, Solomon Islands, and that's this trip.
She'll love that the Met Office lost that BBC contract. Now they get to go and do more fun trips.
That's what it is, yeah.
Tom Andrews got in touch on this one. He said, the type of player you get excited to see in Super League. Hopefully he becomes a star starting after next week, because next week Catalans visit Hull Kingston Rovers.
Yeah, I was surprised that Sam Cassiano is only 28.
Massively surprised. It feels like, one, he was already in his 30s when he joined Melbourne last year. Was it before last year? And 2, that he's been around forever, because he just looks like an old guy, doesn't he, with his gut and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, you could easily put 5 years on that and not be too shocked.
No. If he was our age, I wouldn't be shocked, like you say.
Anyway, Hull have signed former St Helens and Warrington forward Andre Cervello from Brisbane Broncos on a 3-year deal. Cervello, who's 23, recently revealed his intentions to return home following an injury-plagued spell in the NRL, where he failed to make his first-grade appearance.
Yeah, I have a quick take on this one. I think Andre Cervello is an incredibly talented player, and at 23, probably fits the age profile in the pack that Hull FC need a bit more of, especially in that back row, where the starting back row is Minicello, Manu, and Westerman, who are all 30 or up. So, Westerman's about 30, I think. But so I think that's a good move for them, and I think he's a really talented player as long as he applies himself. We've wondered whether he's really applied himself in the past in his career over here. So I'd say as long as he applies himself, that's a fantastic signing for Hull FC on a nice long contract as well, 3-year deal. So hopefully his injury woes are behind him and he plays up to his talent levels.
Yeah, all the best to him.
Featherstone have announced the signing of Wakefield halfback Ben Reynolds on a 1-month loan deal. I forgot Ben Reynolds, was it? Was it Wakefield? I think he doesn't need the game time, so good luck to him.
Toronto have signed outside back Jack Lurgan on a 1-month loan deal from Hull FC.
Former Wakefield halfback Liam Finn has left the Newcastle Thunder after playing just 3 games for the club to rejoin Dewsbury, who he must have played for a million years ago. Finn, 35, dropped down from the Super League at the end of the last season, combining playing part-time with a coaching role at Trinity. However, the increased travel to the northeast has forced him to look for an alternative playing option closer to home. And Tom Andrews got in touch. He said, "Stinks in my opinion. He knew what he was signing up for. Newcastle didn't suddenly get further away. Should have to pay back the monies earned so far, in my opinion. What say you, Tim?"
He didn't look I have to say, he didn't look particularly interested when I saw him play for Newcastle against Coventry. So I don't know if it was possibly that he also wasn't fitting in the group, or it was the unrest and led to the coaching situation. I don't really know, but he didn't look particularly like he was gelling in that group at that time. So I'm not hugely surprised. I think the change of coach has probably expedited that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that Dewsbury will have a half-back pairing with a combined age of 73.
Well, to be fair, they had a back rower playing at half-back against Toronto the other week, didn't they? So, a 35-year-old is better than no half-back, I would suppose.
Next to a 37-year-old, yeah. It's
But there's
Sykes,
plenty of competition for goal kicking between those two former Wakefield goal kickers, though, with Sykes and Finn in that Dewsbury side. What I would say is, although Newcastle didn't suddenly get further away, and I think you sympathise with Tom on that point of view, you don't really know how something's going to work out logistically until you're actually doing it day to day. So there is an element there that I sympathise with. The reality turned out to be much more difficult logistically for him maybe than what he'd imagined it would be. And the other thing I would say is it's probably not just the travel into the northeast. League One involves a lot more travel, I would say, week to week than the Championship does. Because in the Championship he'll be playing against Featherstone, against Batley, against Bradford, against Halifax. I know there's two particularly long trips, Toronto and Toulouse, but that's two long trips. Everything else, the next furthest he'd have to go is it Widnes?
Or Sheffield, or yeah. Yeah.
Well, Barrow. I suppose there's one trip to Barrow. But there's all that other travelling that you have to maybe factor in that he hadn't maybe realised as well. I just think...
Well, especially as Newcastle seem to play West Wales in every cup competition going. Every time they seem to... And obviously last year they played each other an extra time because of the game that got called off at the last minute. So it does... Yeah, that is probably one of the longest journeys in the whole sport, isn't it? I would imagine.
Does it add more to our concerns that Thunder aren't going to be where we thought they were going to be without Liam Finn, or do you think they'll find a way to spend on a replacement?
They have got replacement for him within the squad, so they got Jaimel Coleman, who they signed from London Scholars at the start of the season. So he came into the game against the West Wales on... I mean, whether Jaimel Coleman is fit enough to do you a whole season is a questionable point, because he's never one that's looked particularly fit. So,
and he's quite old, isn't he?
Since his time out of the sport for not of his choosing, shall we say?
Shall I? I mean, we don't speculate too much, do we, on this show about things that we don't have much substance to. But the Sean Wayne rumour and Dennis Betts as well are two rumoured names around the. Well,
it was interesting because
they're big names, aren't they?
They are big names, because what I saw in one rumour I read was that whichever one of them it was, and it sounded like Sean Wayne had pipped Dennis Betts to it by throwing his hat in the ring at the last minute, was it would be a combined job between because it's the combined owner of the rugby union side and the rugby league side together.
Betts has worked in rugby union before he came back to Widnes.
I believe he's still got a house in Gloucester. Yeah, I believe he's still got a house down there.
And obviously Wayne's in rugby union as it stands. So that it's a way to get the wage up for those guys, isn't it? And certainly they're experienced heads, and they'll have good contacts within the sport to potentially bring in replacements for Liam Finn with an owner who's prepared to spend. So it's very interesting times at Newcastle after a disappointing start to the season. Okay, Leeds youngsters Owen Trout and Muzzy Mustafa have signed month-long loan deals at Dewsbury, so they're joining forces with Liam Finn down at the, what's it called now?
The big woolly place. I don't know.
Crown Flat, is that what its name is?
Crown Oil? No, that was Rochdale.
I don't know. Dewsbury. Right, move on.
Widnes have signed hooker Dominic Speakman following the departure of Liam Hood, who has now had his move to League confirmed. Speakman, who's 24, was on trial with the Vikings during pre-season and has played in the friendly games against Hull KR, Warrington and the North Wales Crusaders.
Are we trying to go for a Eddie Hemmings version of Tom Johnstone here with your Speak Man rather than
possibly?
Widnes have also signed young forward Louis Johnson on a month loan deal from Warrington, but both of these two signings I was reading today in the League Express haven't been ratified yet, because the new board, whilst they're approved by the RFL, haven't been there's some approval for making signings that hasn't been put in place yet. So we'll see.
Oh, right.
We'll see how that develops, because it's a bit of an intriguing one.
Yeah, especially given their offloading players, they need to be able to bounce up on the same token.
Well, Johnson's just a loan, isn't it? You'd think that'd be
allowable.
Okay, maybe
what's wrong? What would be wrong with what's wrong with a loan? Because you're not committing to more than a month worth of money.
And really, are they committing any money? Do we know even that they're committing any money?
Exactly.
Warrington don't have a reserve side, and Louis Johnson was a player that was coming on for him at the back end of last season, but there's just no place in the matchday 17 with the way they've been playing so far and the health situation of that side. That he needs to go out and get some game time. Okay, into League One then. And Whitehaven have handed forward Ethan Kelly a deal for 2019 after a successful trial period with the club. Then Dewsbury forward Harvey Hallas has joined Keighley on a 1-month loan deal, and Keighley have also announced that they've extended the loan of Featherstone prop Jimmy Beckett until the end of the season. So that
wasn't that Walker in Dad's Army? Wasn't he Jimmy Beckett?
I have no idea. But that wraps up League One, Tim.
It does. The Super League clubs have indefinitely delayed the introduction of the 2-referee model. The Super League clubs pulled the plug on the model earlier in the week, despite there having been plans to see the system introduced in the reserve grade this year before being part of the Super League in 2020. Former NRL referee Matt Chechin had been in line to come and oversee the transition, with a job tailored for the 45-year-old advertised in order to make it possible for him to get a visa. However, Chechin is now set to continue his association with the NRL rather than continue over here in Super League. This is an interesting one because this was one of Rob Elston's big promises, not on his sex tape, but on his introduction to the sport.
And it's interesting that the way the press has written this story, I think, the text we've done has been taken from Total RL. Always, as we always say every week, go and check out totalrl.com and loverugbyleague.com regularly to get all the good details on the weekly news. But I think we've taken it from there. But it's interesting that in all of the ones I've read, the emphasis was on the Super League clubs have pulled the plug. Do you think Elston's kind of making it clear that he wants this, but the clubs aren't willing to finance it, maybe? Quite
possibly, yeah. I think finance is the thing. I suppose the issue as well is that given that we don't have a big enough established group of tier 1 referees, if you spread that thinly, but say if you put Hicks and James Child together on a match, although they don't do it as much because they do balance out. But if that happened, if they're together on a big game, say Wigan Saints Derby, does that then mean that the game somewhere else gets 2 lesser referees and therefore it actually makes the issue worse? And it means that then skews the competitive balance, possibly.
I think what the NRL have done with 2 referees and what Matt Chechin would have been able to help us with if the role could have been fulfilled. What NRL kind of does well is the 2 referees has actually made the referees more consistent to the same interpretation of the rule book, rather than have differences between the referees. And I think full time has made that happen to an extent here. But when you've got another guy keeping you in check all game, I don't think it matters, more experienced or lesser experienced. They probably would work the model around a dominant and a secondary referee, but I don't think it really matters so much that as you're making out. I think you probably would have had more like a situation of Thaler and Dolan, or Hicks and who's the other young one that's on the scene at the moment? Hicks and Moore, for example. Did you see what I mean?
Yeah, Grant or something. Yeah,
Tom Grant. That's the one I was thinking.
Sounds like we're doing some sort of fancy cop show, doesn't it? Bloody pairings.
We're spitballing names for cop shows here, rather than talking about referee combos. But disappointing.
Yeah, I think so. I think again, it just keeps us that step further away from the consistency between the NRL and Super League, which makes it harder to explain the difference to someone outside the sport. Also means that when we come to internationals, if internationals was to move to that model, it puts us even further behind.
But but it's realistic, isn't it, for the money? And there's also not a ton of money for this sort of stuff probably within the international game, and they'd have to, get referees to games and pay referees to be at games in the international calendar. So